The Bill O'Brien podcast reaches thousands of BC football fans each week. Your company has the unique opportunity to tap into this upscale audience by becoming a sponsor. Contact Mike Wynn at mwinn@bostoncollegeas.com for more information.
This is the Bill O'Brien podcast with your host, John Meterparel.
Caught past the 25 to the 20 to the 15, goes Bond to the 10 to the 5 towards the end zone and in. Lewis Bond is the Eagle in the end zone.
Producer Ciaccio.
We were using the equipment from like the 1970s when Ciaccio was
the 90s. It was the 90s.
Ciaccio was like
the gerbil in the back was cranking it up.
Yeah.
The Bill O'Brien podcast, talking BC football, sports, pop culture.
The sun will come up tomorrow, slowly, but it'll come up.
The Bill O'Brien podcast.
Welcome to episode 39 of the Bill O'Brien podcast, which leads me to one and one only. Mike Gator
Greenwell, no doubt. Oh, that's awesome. This might be the first time in 39 episodes we've been on the same page. I almost finished your sentence right there.
Yes, you did.
He was awesome, man.
He had that one year hard when he should have been the MVP in 88.
No doubt, right? Wasn't that the year he almost hit 400, or he was
flirting with, no, not 400, but he was flirting with a lot of upper level categories.
Yep, he was awesome.
Canseco was not the MVP. I'm sorry.
No, and Greeny would jump up against the wall and make play. You know, he played hard, man. Dove for balls, like he was.
That's a guy you want to manage.
Yeah, that's a guy that's a Boston Red Sox.
We were talking about Costas and his Netflix.
Yeah, Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter to you.
Did you guys enjoy your Easter dinners?
Yes, very much so. Made a nice ham, brought it to my mom's. Family got together. Coach.
Nice.
Wait, you made the ham or you went to honey ham?
I didn't. Honey ham, I need to get a couple more shekels from, from the Bill O'Brien podcast. From the Bill O'Brien podcast to afford a honey ham.
It's not paying the bills.
It's not paying the bills. Made my own. I mean, you buy it in the supermarket meat. It's the simplest piece.
You made your own ham. You cooked the ham.
You heat it up.
That's all you do?
It's pre-cooked.
Don't you have to
put it in the oven?
Cure it?
No, that's already done. What do you like?
I'm with
Hungry
you, though,
man meals.
I'm finding it hard to believe that he cooked his own ham, but I'll take it.
And I made Brussels sprouts.
I also find it hard to believe that you wake up at 4:30 and do your gardening.
I do not do my gardening. That's another inside
More
baseball.
shocked.
There was a lot of BS being
More shocked that he
back
gets
and
that
forth.
beard shaved. Too, remember?
The other day. Here I get a text the other day. What are you doing, Meter? Why aren't you responding to my text? It was like I was in the barber chair getting my beard trimmed.
You just have the cat lick it off.
By the lovely Linda at 818 in Westwood.
818.
Could be a future sponsor.
Doubt it.
And Bill said, "Do you pay for that?" I said, "Yeah, I pay for that." And he said, then my next line was, "Yeah, it relaxes and soothes me."
No question. I'm not one to talk about hair, so I'm going to stop right there.
Yeah, let's move on. Marathon was yesterday.
Marathon was yesterday.
What are you like, Shecky the conductor over here? We'll get to all this. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Just trying to move off of the beard talk.
Don't worry. Well, we could talk beards all you want. Who's got the best beard ever?
Ryan Fitzpatrick.
I knew you were going to say that. See? Was that, did he get that, trimmed?
At times, but during the season, when I was coaching him, it was full go, grown up.
He's also making $1 million a year.
A lot of money.
What was it like to coach him?
Great guy. One of the mistakes I thought we made early on in my tenure. Now we won. I'm not saying we were 9-7 with him, and after the first year, 2014, we cut him. We moved on from him, and I think he was a great guy in the locker room, great teammate. Still keep in touch with him to this day. He's an awesome guy, great husband, great father. Everything you're looking for.
Is he liking the broadcasting?
He loves it. Yeah, he loves it. He's got a good, good rapport with Whitworth and those guys. He's got a podcast now that they do a great job on.
Add him to the list.
Go.
He'll come on here. He's a great dude.
It was hilarious when he went back to Buffalo. Was it the playoff game when he
took his shirt off?
Took his shirt off.
No question.
I was like,
the best.
Yeah, he was. Nuts. I remember when he was at Harvard.
Yeah,
he kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah, he was on the. He kind of was important with the latest Harvard hire there, football wise. The guy's doing a good job over there.
D-line coach from Princeton.
Yeah, Fitzy was headed up that search committee, I think.
Did he? He's proud of Northern Arizona, right?
Yeah, he's from. Yep.
All right, marathon was yesterday. Ciaccio just finished. We were outside.
Didn't make
there.
the medal.
I ran the course. I drove the course today.
Yeah, same.
I like the sign at Newton when you go up Heartbreak Hill. There's a nice. Have you seen the sign?
Yeah, that's cool.
Newton congratulates you.
Yeah.
You just climbed Heartbreak Hill. But
Yeah.
this was an important race for the O'Brien family
Yes.
for many reasons.
Yeah, my wife Colleen has a bunch of roommates, awesome women from Boston College, class of 1992. Helen Marone, Doug Marone's wife, is one.
Nice.
Tricia Fecco, Dr. Tricia Fecco. She's a 92 graduate. She's a doctor from Boston College, from Albany, New York. And then there was a woman named Roseanne Sheehan, who was a great softball player here, was all Big East second baseman back in the day. And unfortunately, sad deal last year, passed away from cancer. She was an awesome person. She was a teacher. She was just an incredible person, came from a great family. Had her wife, Abby, is an awesome person. She was here yesterday. But anyways, one of Colleen's roommates, Stephanie Evans Green, who's another great person, ran the marathon. This was her second marathon. She ran the New York City Marathon a couple of years ago. She ran this marathon to raise money in the name of Roseanne Sheehan for the Dana-Farber Institute. So it was just a cool day because they all came back, great reunion. We went out to dinner. They watched her. I couldn't watch her because I was working here yesterday, but they watched Stephanie run by. And Stephanie said that the BC part of the route was the best, the cheers, the students, it was just an electric atmosphere. So, and Stephanie is an avid listener to this podcast.
Excellent.
And she's just a great person, and she completed it. She beat her own marathon by almost like an hour or something like that. Like she really trained for this one and
it
got into shape for it and did a great job.
Yesterday wasn't really good running weather. It was like warm. The sun hit,
right,
so that's great.
right.
I think
That's
it
awesome.
was.
Yeah, very proud of her.
I mean, it was breezy, but at times it was cold. So
Very proud of her.
The winner set a record, female winner.
Yeah,
2:17.
I saw that. That was unbelievable.
And the finish was amazing. For the last mile, they were down the stretch. They come neck and neck.
Unbelievable.
But congrats. Take a bow, Stephanie.
Take a bow, Stephanie, no question.
That is such a great, one of those great stories you hear surrounding this event every year. The amount of charity that's raised, and everybody has a personal story. That's why, you might not be. No one's a real huge marathon fan out there necessarily, but this day is full of storytelling.
No doubt. I know you feel the same way, Ciaccio. I know you feel the same way. Growing up around here, the marathon was a big deal, right? It was usually on Channel 4, I think. You guys would know better than me. Now it's on Channel 5.
used to be on all of them.
Used to be on all of them, that's right. And
John Dennis in the lead truck.
God.
starting in
Tony
Hopkinton.
Revis.
Right.
Yeah.
I can just remember my brother ran it years and years ago. My brother ran it probably 30 years ago. My brother Tom, I can remember watching him come up Heartbreak Hill. He was struggling, but he made it. He did a great job. But like you said, Meter, you have all these. What I didn't know, having been away from here for a while, is you come back and all the people that run it to raise money for different charitable
You have to
organizations
do.
is incredible.
I think it's part of how you get your number.
My niece ran it for her brother, who's losing his hearing at a very young age, and she ran it and got the medal because you have to do it in under 5 hours. Her first time doing it, she raised like almost $15,000 for Mass Eye and Ear. She
How about
had
that?
to raise a lot of money for it.
That's
so.
incredible.
Did you guys see the video of the guy that crossing, like literally crawling across the finish line?
I did. That was amazing.
The guy cramped up like 10 feet from the finish line.
Oh yeah, I did. I just saw
collapsed.
that. Yep.
That's the other thing you see, like the personal, stories of the physical toughness it takes to run 26.2 miles, and the medal, Ciaccio, that you talked about. Stephanie had her medal with her last night. We went to O'Hara's for dinner with a bunch of people, and the medal's cool, man. That's
It's heavy.
medal.
Yeah, it's a heavy medal. It's a pretty good deal.
The Bill O'Brien podcast reaches thousands of BC football fans each week. Your company has the unique opportunity to tap into this upscale audience by becoming a sponsor. Contact Mike Wynn at MWINN@bostoncollegeas.com for more information.
All right, we go from the marathon to one of the legends in football evaluation business.
Yeah, no doubt.
Scott Pioli is our guest, and he really needs no introduction.
No, I mean, you're talking about, first of all, we really appreciate him being on because he's busy. It's draft time. He's got a lot going on. But, you're talking about one of the best general managers in the history of the game. I mean, a guy that was one of the architects of putting together the initial, Patriot dynasty. And it's going to be awesome to hear Scott and hear his history and all the different stories that he has. It's awesome to have you on, Scott.
And Scott, we're looking at you. People can't see you, but someday they will here on the show. Yeah. But we are looking at Super Bowl trophies. We're looking at books. We're looking at Sports Illustrated covers. You're sitting in your office, which we see all the time on NFL Network. Just tell us, give everybody a little theater of the mind here. What are we looking at?
We're looking at. I always want to have a story back here, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the trophies are the trophies. I've got my old Central Connecticut State University helmet.
Yes, sir.
Always there. And then I always have the Sports Illustrateds in the back to kind of tell a different story depending on the show or what's happening. So back there, of course, I've got Brewski and one Sports Illustrated cover. A lot of these youngsters don't know what Sports Illustrateds are. There used to be these things called magazines. And I've got a huge Sports Illustrated collection. And the ones that are always there, you see Billie Jean King's always up there. Got to rep Billie Jean King. Wow. Always have Dick Butkus, the original 51.
No question.
Right?
No doubt.
And Coach Eddie Robinson from Grambling. And I just kind of switch them out. The books, yes, everyone that's back here has been read, Billy O.
Yes, I'm sure it has. You're an avid reader. I remember you telling me that before. You love to read.
Yeah, I love to read.
You love to read. One of the things that, everybody probably has an understanding of your history with the Patriots, and we'll get to that. But I think what's always cool about you, Scott, is kind of like your beginnings, right? When you got out of Central Connecticut and, your Syracuse background, kind of like how you got started in the business, because you were one of the things that I think makes a great general manager is having some coaching background too, like. And you coached and you knew what that was all about. Can you kind of fill us in on that a little bit, fill the viewers in?
Yeah, so, when I got done playing in Central Connecticut, or even during that time, I thought I wanted to be a coach. That's what I always wanted to do. My goal in life was I was going to go back to Washingtonville High School in Washingtonville, New York, where I grew up, and be the high school coach and give back to the game what I got out of it, right? Yep. And then after college, I had a couple of opportunities, but the best one that popped up out of nowhere, I interviewed for a graduate assistant job at Syracuse, and they were hiring 3 new GAs. I came in 4th, and, I thought they were just being nice. Wow, you just missed the cut. And I was actually on my way then. I was going to go to Wesleyan, where Belichick was. He had hooked me up with a guy, Kevin Spencer, who was the head coach at the time, and I thought I was going to Wesleyan. I accepted that job. And then 2 weeks later, I get a call from Bill Maxwell, who was the assistant head coach at Syracuse, telling me Coach McPherson wants to know if you'd accept the job. One of the first 3 guys bailed out. And I remember calling Bill and saying to Bill, hey, but I already committed to, Bill's the defense coordinator at the Giants at the time. And he was one of my early mentors. And he said, hey, if you don't take that Syracuse job, don't bother calling me again because you're pretty dumb if you don't do it. So I went up to Syracuse, and I'm going to tell you what, and I know there's some mixed feelings about Coach McPherson in the New England area because of the Patriot thing, but he was a great coach at UMass before that.
Yeah.
Coach Mack was one of the most influential, impactful, incredible human beings and football coaches that I've met in my lifetime. And God rest his soul. So it was an incredible staff. I mean, Randy Edsel was the secondary coach. Clarence Brooks was the defensive line coach. Paul Pasqualoni was the linebackers coach. George DeLeon, OL. I mean, there was a staff. Jim Hoffer, who became a great coach. And it was a super place to be.
Who's who?
Interestingly, the GA that I replaced, the offensive line GA to work for DeLeon, was Jeff Stoutland.
How about that?
How about that?
He's turned out all right.
Yeah, he did okay. Well, that's the thing. If you work for George DeLeon, you learned a lot of football.
Yeah, no doubt.
And so after Syracuse, interesting story. My first interview for a real job was with the University of Maine, and the head coach at the University of Maine shot me down.
How about that?
Kirk
Ferentz.
Kirk Ferentz. He hired a BC GA over me, a guy by the name of Bobby Wilder, who great player at the University of Maine. Exactly right. Quarterback.
Yep.
Played against Bobby in college.
Yep.
And so Bobby got the job, and I ended up getting a full-time job at Murray State University. Was the offensive line coach for 2 years. I got 4 years of coaching.
Yep.
And it's funny you say that, Billy, though. And, so many times when I hear young people say, what do I need to do to break in? They want to be front office. Everyone's, I want to be a GM. Well, you and 10 million other people.
Right.
How about learning the game?
Right.
Right. There'll be a time to learn the numbers, the cap. But if you're going to be evaluating players and you don't know what they're supposed to do, like if you don't, hey, cover 2, cover 5, too deep, but one's man under, one's zone under.
Right.
Learn coverages, learn the game.
No doubt.
Because even when you know the game, there's adjustments and game planning things that go into games that even the best evaluators that know the game get it wrong.
No doubt. No doubt.
So you got to know the game.
When you think back, so like on your career, and this is a famous, one of those football lives, the Cleveland '95, which I've watched several times. It's just an awesome. Yeah. It's one of the best ones, I think. That was one of the things that stood out. And when I went to the Patriots, that was always what stood out to me was like you did. Look, this is your role. This is what you're going to do. I mean, if you think about Josh McDaniels, what he started out as, or Can you kind of go back and talk to the listeners a little bit about that Cleveland '95? Like some of you guys like did laundry, lined the field. I mean, you were doing all kinds of stuff, right?
Picking up coaches at airports.
Future.
That was me. It's funny. Picking up people at the airport. Kirk Ferentz, when we interviewed him in 1993 at the Browns, I had to pick him up at the airport.
No kidding.
I remember him looking at me. He says, "Please don't drive me off the road because you want to see my family." But yeah, I mean, it was. Some incredible people came through there. I mean, at the slappy level. That's what we refer to as a slap.
That's right.
Actually. And once a slappy, always a slap.
That's right.
And, they hired Bill Savage, George Kokinis, Jim Schwartz, myself. Now, we were the entry-level slappy.
Wow. Yes.
But if you go back and you look at that staff, Ozzie Newsome had just retired. He wasn't sure if he wanted to be in coaching or front office or scouting or what he wanted to do. So he did a little bit of both. And, it's funny, Billy, I've been listening to you on some of your podcasts and some of your interviews, and I love listening to you talk about player development.
Yeah.
And one of the big things about that program and that we brought forward to the New England Patriots, exponentially, was talent development.
Right.
And that's something that you always have to pay. It's not just players, it's not just coaches, it's front office, it's throughout your entire football operation.
Yep.
And during that time in Cleveland, maybe some of us had skills and talent, and you go back and Lionel Vitale was an entry-level scout. Terry McDonough, son of Will McDonough, brother of Sean.
Yep.
There was a group of us that came through there, but here's what we had that's so important to that whole thing. There were so many talented coaches there. I mean, yes, Bill was the head coach, but there was Ernie Adams was there. Woody Woodenhofer. Nick Saban was our defensive coordinator. Woody was our linebackers coach. John Mitchell was our defensive line coach. I mean, the list. Kirk Ferentz was our offensive line coach. Our assistant offensive line coach was Pat Hill, who became the head coach at Fresno State.
The all-star cast.
I mean, that's the guy who gave us all the intel on Logan Mankins.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's amazing.
And, so what there was this wealth of knowledge where we could learn, and then the scouts. Tom Dimitroff Sr. was there.
Yep.
Thomas's dad.
Yep.
He was one of my mentors. Dom O'Neely. So, there were just
Dom
great
O'Neely, that's incredible.
From. Dom O'Neely.
Yeah, he was a legend. Legend. Hey, going back, just rewinding a little bit because, like we talked about before we went on air, I know that you're passionate about New England football and not just at the pro level, right? You're in college level, but the high school level because, your roommates in college, I believe, were Everett guys, or at least one of them, maybe two of them. Can you kind of talk about those guys and how that got you kind of interested in following Massachusetts high school football, which we try to recruit the heck out of Massachusetts and New England.
And if you guys get the best ones in Massachusetts and New England, you're going to be a champion.
We can win. Yeah, we can win.
Definitely.
So my when I first got to Central Connecticut, BC was my safety school, so I went to Central Connecticut, and the So I went there, and the first couple of guys I met were these 3 guys from Everett, and they were known as the Everett Boys. The Grava brothers, Grava, Chrysler, Jeep.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The Grava Boys.
We know the Grava boys.
And Ralph Marchant. And, the Grava Boys went to Everett High. Ralph went to, I think it was Pope John, which is no longer around.
That's
and then
right.
the next,
right.
So I ended up living with 3 guys. A guy by the name of John Leet, who was also from Everett. He went to Malden Catholic. And Paulie Caramanica from Everett. Anyway, the Everett boys were coached by John DiBiaso. Anyone who knows, you got Jonathan on your staff.
Yes, we do.
Coach Dibbs coached every single one of my boys.
How about that?
And, whether it was youth or at Everett High, the guys who went to private schools because they got kicked out of Everett High, the Everett boys, they all knew Coach Dibbs. And, when I went to school, there were so many guys from Massachusetts. I remember hearing the legendary, Armand Colombo from Brockton,
yeah.
The Brockton Boxers. We had Ronnie McMurtry was at Central Connecticut. Greg's, older
brother. Yeah.
But there was the guys from Massachusetts. They were like this pack. They all played in the Aganis All-Star game together. They were such a cool.
Awesome.
I heard you on the last show talking about Walpole, the Walpole Rebels.
Yeah,
Are they still called the Rebels?
The General Lee.
No,
they had to change that
they changed
name.
it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, all right.
We won't go down
they
that.
They were the Rebels.
Yeah, we don't.
They were.
Our quarterback was Billy Von Klock.
Yes.
Who was a tremendous player at Walpole High.
This is awesome.
He was with them for at least one of their state championships.
Yep.
But yeah, the Massachusetts high school football's good, man.
Yeah. We try to. We really do, and you know this. I mean, we've talked about this before, but we're doing the best we can. I think we've got 6 or 7 kids committed out of Massachusetts right now for the class of 26, which is good. Last year we signed 4 or 5 kids out of Massachusetts, so that's a huge thing for us, right? We've got to do a good job of that because there are good players in the in this area, no doubt about it.
There's a ton of them. Scott Pioli is our guest again, a guy who needs no introduction. Scott. I connected with you again a couple months ago when I saw you on NFL Network. And I mentioned in my other podcast world, I'm doing a sports media podcast, and I gave you a thumbs up, and I meant it generally because, as I said on the podcast, you told me something I didn't know. I think you're learning in the broadcast world that's very important. And to be doing your homework, be prepared, be concise, get to the point. You're doing a great job on NFL Network. What have you learned about the industry from that chair?
I've learned a lot. Honestly, I wish there was more that I knew before I did my old job in terms of working in football, because I think one of the most important things is as you come up and you grow up in a certain family of football, you're taught that it's us versus them. And you see one person make a mistake or do something from the media side, you automatically shut down. And sometimes I had myself and others I know that work with would make it personal with the talent, so to speak. And what I've learned is that sometimes the talent doesn't necessarily want to ask the questions or say the thing or do the things that they're saying. That they have bosses too. People in the media have bosses, they have families, they have bills to pay.
Oh, yeah.
So they've got to do their job and they've got to keep their job. Yep. Sometimes media folks are cornered into situations and circumstances that they naturally as human beings don't feel comfortable with, but they have to do it. And so was a really important thing because it's given me a different perspective of grace and or empathy for those people. And it's interesting, Meter, because when I went into doing it, one of the things I've consistently asked my bosses, whether it's at NFL Network or CBS or anywhere else I've worked, I said, listen, I'm about elevating people and educating. Please allow me to educate, not speculate. Because I can't look at a game on Sunday or Saturday and say, hey, this team's going to win because of blah. Or Coach O'Brien makes a call. Why did he do that? And then criticize him. Well, I don't know the circumstances and the situation, so allow me to educate rather than speculate.
Right.
And there's enough mean people out there, right? And
Oh, yeah.
and there's people who thrive in that, and God bless them if that's who they are. But again, being able to educate and tell people just simply through really cool experiences, because I was blessed to have over 30 years in football, and I learned a lot because I was around some really smart people.
Yep.
And I just love to share those experiences because there's nothing more exciting than telling the history or informing people and educating people about the game and the people in the game.
That's awesome. Hey, one of the things that I always thought, I wasn't there, right? I came in 2007, and I was always enamored by the early years of the Patriots when you guys went there, when you and Bill went there. You know, that first year, 2000, you guys were 5-11, right? And that's kind of when can you kind of go through that, like how that you know, you knew that was a difficult time. I think you guys were probably, you know, concerned about, like you just said, you know, families, jobs, trying to keep, you know, but making the right decisions for the team. That must have been an unbelievable off season though, after that 5-11 season, or maybe even before that. But I'm always interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so the first year we rolled in, it was, you know, that year the salary cap I want to say was like $42 million. That was the cap, right?
Jeez.
That's
Times have changed.
But we were way over the cap.
How about that?
And we had I think it was 42 players under contract on a 53-man roster, you know, let alone adding the 80 I think it was 85 at the time, the roster. But we were so far over the cap. What the Patriots had done prior to that was what other teams were doing is they were borrowing against the cap. So they, you know, you had players under contracts that there would have been so much dead money and you would have been paralyzed unless you built exclusively under the draft that, you know, you wouldn't have been able to have time to develop talent. So
right.
it was complicated because we had to cut $10.5 million, I think it was, off the cap. And we had, by the time we're done cutting, there was 41 players. And we had to build a roster. And there were a lot of aging players that were really good players. I mean, Ben Coates was a really good player. Bruce Armstrong, like top Patriots,
yep.
you know. And but they were aging out, and their ability didn't at that time match what the contract's going to be. So what we had to do is we bit the bullet, and we tried to put together the team the best that we could that year. The next year, though, we went out and signed in the 2001 season, right? We coming off the 5-11 season, brutal. And, you know, when you start hearing whispers, you know that
it's not good.
You know where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And we went out and signed 23 free agents.
How about that?
In 2001. And people forget that about that Patriot team. And but here's the thing. The 23 free agents we signed, the total signing bonus was $2.5 million. We signed Vrabel. I think we gave Vrabel like $150,000 signing bonus.
Oh yeah, and he everybody knows that. Just ask him. He's
right,
like,
because he still
in Houston,
complains about it. Absolutely.
I only got $150,000. You guys are getting. He never forgets, as we know.
Yeah, but Mike. The thing is, Vrabel hadn't started prior to that. He was
exactly.
primarily a special teams player, and we built the team through because personally, my background had been in pro personnel, so I knew who the backup players were. I knew who and we, myself, Ernie Adams, Andre Tippett, who was still working in the pro personnel department at that point in time. Mm-hmm. We worked really hard, and we ferreted out guys. Here's the thing, though. What we decided we were going to do wasn't just – we weren't looking for cheap players. We were looking for smart, tough, competitive players that were going to be willing to live in Bill's culture, which was truly about meritocracy.
Yep.
He didn't care about where you were drafted. That was our program.
Yep.
And we offered opportunity. And we built also a ton of contracts that were incentive-laden.
Yep.
Right? So players would get paid more if they played more. And then if we won more, we always put that little caveat in there. If we had one more win than we had the season before, or if we win the division, or if we win the first round of the playoffs, players would get paid more in their contracts for each team.
That's incredible.
Incentive that we put out there too. So it wasn't about some guy just trying to score 6 touchdowns. If you score 6 touchdowns and we win 9 games, well, then you get a little juice.
Unbelievable.
So building that team, Billy, was but we went out and got guys that. Here was the important part. I had been with Bill in Cleveland, and one of the things that we talked about was making sure that we had players that understood who he was and how he was going to coach. Because, like in your situation now, Billy, you can find talent all day long.
Yep.
But if they don't the leader isn't the general manager. Players could care less about the general manager, vice president, player personnel, whatever. They didn't care about me only during the contract negotiation.
Yeah.
But once it started, the head coach is the leader.
Yep.
Right. So you need to build your culture around your players.
No doubt.
25 years ago, you were in a room and you're in the 6th round, and pick 199 is on the board. Describe what it was like. Give us the definitive story of the Tom Brady selection.
I mean, let's start with the fact that none of us knew what he was going to be. I mean,
he would have gone number 1.
I mean, right. And even people, it's so funny. I've heard, some people say, "Oh yeah, we had him rated as a 1st-round pick." You're so full.
Get
of
out
crap.
of here.
Just let it go.
Just let it go. Exactly.
Because Tommy wasn't even ready then.
Right.
Here's what it was. Tommy was the perfect player for the perfect situation with the perfect staff.
Yep.
It was an alignment of all of these things. And I say to this day, especially when I hear that obnoxious question, was it Belichick or was it Brady? It's so
obnoxious.
It's obnoxious, and it's inconsiderate, it's disrespectful. Tommy ended up in the perfect situation for him. Therefore, we also ended up with the perfect person that could develop. Again, it was just the perfect match. And Tommy had a lot of people around him and a lot of support helping him develop. Yes, he had arguably the greatest head coach in NFL history. And he also had Dick Rabine, Charlie Weiss, who to this day, I still think Charlie Weiss is one of the best play callers I've ever been around.
Yeah, he did a great job.
And Ernie Adams. Yep. I mean, Billy, you remember, Ernie was the guy that made the tapes, man. People don't know what Ernie did, but he made the tapes for people.
No question.
So when we drafted Tommy, it was, we liked this guy, but part of it was because here's what we wanted: guys from big schools. We wanted guys who were winners.
Yep.
And, Michigan just seemed to win every time he played. Remember, there was that whole Tom Brady, Drew Henson thing going on.
Yep.
And Dick Rabine, God rest his soul.
Yep.
We lost Dick in training camp of the 2001 season. He had a heart attack on it.
I remember.
On the treadmill.
Awful.
But Dick had spent so much time helping develop him. He also worked him out at Michigan.
Right.
So there was this, I go back and I still have the old scouting reports. You know who else in the scouting department actually wrote the most positive report that saved was Andre Tippett.
How about that?
No kidding.
Andre Tippett had a really strong report on Tom Brady.
How about that?
And
that's awesome.
And remember, Bobby Greer was still there too.
Yeah, Bobby was in Houston when I went to Houston.
So it's not to me. What I always look back on that thing was they want to give this person credit or these couple of people credit. This was like the perfect football magic, man, because it was not only the evaluation process that included people, it was the selection process, and then the development, and then the retention. That's the other thing I keep, Billy, when I hear you talking, I want to jump in some of these interviews you do, because you talk about all the stuff that matters. It's talent acquisition, it's talent development, keep them along, but it's also talent retention.
Keep them.
Yes.
Keep them.
Talent retention.
It's a huge deal here. Hey, along the lines of Tom, I think one of the key decisions, and I've heard you talk about this personally, right? Because you and I are great friends. But when you guys decided to keep him as the 4th quarterback, right? Which is, it was very rare to do that. Like sometimes when I was at the Patriots, right, we kept 2, let alone 3 or 4. And so, like, what do you remember back to? I know you do. Like, just thinking about that, like, you guys obviously saw something, right? You saw, because I remember Brad Seeley saying, like, Tom wasn't very good as a true rookie, like he was, but there was something there that people saw. Like, can you kind of go back to that?
Yeah, some of it's corny stuff, right? All the stuff that the geniuses roll their eyes at. Here's the deal: he was the total package in terms of his makeup.
Yeah,
Yep.
He learned fast. He worked hard. The guy was there crazy hours as a rookie.
yeah,
And we kept, we had Drew Bledsoe into the huge contract. We had John Freese was our number 2, and we had Michael Bishop as our number 3. And Brady was 4. And here's the funny thing. We kept, like you mentioned, 4 quarterbacks on the roster that year.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a point in time, because we were so broke. Here's another thing about how broke we were. We had 51 players on the 53-man roster at one point in time. We also had kind of the practice squad limit was 5, and we went 3 or 4 sometimes. But we never moved off of Brady because we saw in his makeup, and this is where I always talk about where makeup matters, and people like to call it character, but to me, character is something different. Tommy has, as we know, sterling character, but he had this makeup and this competitiveness that we saw him quickly moving ahead of Michael Bishop, who was an incredible talent, but not the right quarterback for our system. John Freese, who Tommy was closing in on quickly.
Yep.
And the other thing is, the truth be told, we also, he was the right guy for us for so many reasons.
Right.
And yeah, we kept him. And it's like I said, there was a time we had 51 players in the practice on the regular squad, but we kept 4 quarterbacks. No one in the league was doing that.
It's amazing.
But again, that wasn't just one person that thought that. That wasn't just 2. There was a group of people, and he was developing.
Yep, no doubt.
Even Mike Woysick, the strength coach, would talk about how hard the guy was working.
Right.
And Jim Whalen, and the trainers, and Ron was there at the time, but they would talk about this guy is, he's doing everything he needs to do to get better.
That's amazing.
NFL draft is upon us again. You'll be active with the NFL Network. People talk about this draft. They say it's a B- draft. There's not many impact players. It's top heavy. What do you see in this draft, Scott, as we sit here a couple days before?
It doesn't matter how you see it before. There's going to be a bunch of guys from this draft that are playing. Those are the players. That's the pool. People love to pick it apart too much. There's going to be a bunch of good players in this draft. I look back retrospectively, and sometimes if the talent's not at the top, well, maybe you find it at the middle, maybe you find it at the end. You go back to, I remember my first year in Kansas City. The talent at the top of that draft, after Stafford, it was, good luck trying to trade back with anybody. The players are, the pool of talent is what the pool of talent is. And again, if you get the right player with enough talent and you have a really good program, you will develop players. People get too caught up in tools and physical skills and times and all that stuff. There's some good football players coming out. Billy, I like the offensive lineman. Someone was asking me about Drew Kendall the other day, and I remind him, we took
Dan Copen.
Danny Copen, 5th round, and Danny Copen. Here's the thing: I know Drew's really smart.
Yep.
He's smart like Danny.
Yep.
And what good young quarterbacks need are smart centers.
No doubt. And he's that. He was a glue guy, no doubt about it.
Yeah, Ozzy's a good player. These guys. And again, guys don't have to make Pro Bowls for you to have a good draft. They need to stay in the league a long time.
Exactly.
And be good players.
It's funny. Like Matt Ryan came and spoke to the team a couple weeks ago, and he, on the way to BC, Julio Jones had just happened to call him just to catch up, and Julio said, "Matt, where you headed?" "Hey, I'm going up to BC to watch spring practice." And Julio Jones said, "I love playing with BC guys because they were dependable. You knew they were going to be there every day. They were going to give you everything they had. They had a level of talent, but they got everything they could out of that talent." And I think that's when you're talking about Ozzie and Drew and Donovan Ezaraku, and there's a couple other maybe priority free agent guys, Kai Robichaud in that list, Cam Horsley, the defensive tackle. These guys are going to come into an organization. They're going to work hard. They're going to be there every day. They're not going to be in the training room all the time. They're going to do what you ask them to do.
They're pros, and that's been one of the interesting cultural things about Boston College football. for so many years, right? There's a few one-offs in there, but for going back to Coach Bicknell, going to Coach O'Brien, who we talked about. I think we were talking about him before we went on air, but it's funny because I have this group that I call the BC3, and I don't know if we've ever talked about this. And the BC3, so when we talk about talent identification, talent evaluation, talent acquisition, and then the retention and the development, when I was at the Patriots, I used to spend a lot of time up at BC because it was the one way I could get out of the office, not be distracted, and watch college tape, right? Because you didn't always get the tape come in that week. It's before it was digital, this thing called digital.
It's a little bit easier now.
Right, you had to wait for the beta tapes to come in from the Dub Center.
Exchange in the highway.
So I would go up there, but I remember being up there with OB. Coach O'Brien, we knew well because he had worked with Steve Belichick,
Navy,
Bill's dad, down at the Naval Academy. And, I knew OB, and I remember asking him, I said, hey, listen, every year I hire slappies, and we had pretty good success where we bring guys. I mean, when the first we brought Dayball in, and then in scouting, people don't realize this. Josh, when he first came to the Patriots, was in scouting.
Yeah, he was labeling tapes. You guys had him labeling.
So he was working upstairs with me, and we had this great run of guys that goes on and on and on. But I remember going to OB. I said, "Listen, you know what our culture is like. It's similar to yours. We're complicated. We're different. We're demanding." There's not a lot of thank yous, or that's not true. There's thank yous, but there's not a lot of elevation. And so I said, and at the time I was like, and truthfully, and he says, I got just the guy for you. And he introduced me to Brian Flores.
B-Flow.
Wow.
B-Flow. And B-Flow hadn't graduated yet.
No, he's still playing.
No kidding.
So I talked to B-Flow, and I committed to him. He committed to the job before graduation. Then when B-Flow was there for 2 years, I said, B-Flow, I need another guy just like you. He goes, I got just the guy. He goes, he's coaching high school ball out in Indianapolis where he grew up now. And I go, okay, what's his name? DeJuan Daniels. DeJuan Daniels
great
comes
guy.
in. Right?
Great guy.
So there's two BC, and they're, Billy, to your point, it's players, but it's beyond the players. It's who they are. It's get them. If you don't get them in your football program, get them in your business.
When we went back,
but I got to give you one.
Go ahead.
So when I go out to Kansas City, I had spent time in 2008, and I got to meet the recruiting coordinator at the time, working under Coach Gallup, was Borgonzi.
Oh yeah.
Great guy.
Right? Mike Borgonzi, another Everett guy, by the way.
Everett guy.
Shout out, another Everett High.
Yes.
So
Brown University.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, exactly.
Sneak that in there.
But he was working at BC, and his assistant was a guy who was working as a GA, Ryan Poles.
How about that?
So I talk about having the BC 3.5.
That's awesome.
Now Borgonzi thinks I'm telling a short joke, but I mean, no, you're not. You're a brown guy. You're not a full-on BC guy. So you're only a half.
But Scott,
BC by association.
It's amazing what you're talking about here. And by the way, again, really appreciate you being on. It's awesome to have you on this. When we all went back to Tom's retirement ceremony last summer at Gillette, right? One thing that struck me personally, and I know, you were such a huge part of this, was, like you said, there were a lot of great players. I mean, obviously we had Tom, but there were a lot of great players over the years in that organization. But there were a lot of great people in scouting, coaching, the training room, the weight room, nutrition, like every aspect that you guys were in charge of bringing people into. You guys hit the jackpot on people. I'm talking about that the early part of the dynasty, and then the second part of the dynasty too was there. And I think I tell people at BC all the time, I use that as an example. It really is about the makeup of the people that you bring in, not just the type of players.
You have to be intentional.
That's right.
Again, that's why the talent and the thing is, by the time we had the Cleveland experience, a couple of years later, Bill and I worked together for 3 years at the Jets, and then we go up there. We knew what we were looking for.
Yeah.
And we also had enough to understand that, and I don't say this in like a prideful way, we're complicated, we're difficult, we're demanding, and that's not for everybody.
Right.
And just because that's not for, get the people that fit, and we're going to be able to tolerate the idiosyncrasies
day-to-day grind.
of leadership.
No doubt.
we were all,
That's right.
We were a pain in the butt.
The grind.
The cultural thing at BC too, and I got to mention this. There's this whole thing about the BC experience, and now I'm going to start sounding like a BC infomercial, but this is why our daughter's there.
Right. Awesome.
I mean, she's getting ready to graduate in 3.5 weeks, Billy. It's unbelievable.
Congratulations.
She helps us. She's unbelievable. She helps us in recruiting.
Yeah, no, you mentioned that.
Yeah, great job.
And shout out to Mia Pioli and the girls in
Mia
6A over at the Mods, which is great because Bears gets to look right at
on
her. Yeah, he gets to make sure there's not too much crazy stuff going on. But the whole BC thing, it's the football thing, and Billy, and I'm not saying this to blow smoke in your direction. The truth is, you are the perfect guy for this job, and you're going to do and going to have people and mold people because you're not only bringing the right guys, but you're also fostering the right stuff.
Right.
They're going to grow and they're going to come out of the program. But that's what the university culture is like.
Yeah, no doubt.
I look at Coach Brown and Katie King Crowley and how they run their programs in the hockey. And Father Jack now.
Yeah.
I mean,
they walk the walk. They don't just talk the talk.
Gets it.
No doubt. Hey, I have to ask you this because I'm, I look up to this guy. I've read about this guy, and you're obviously so close to this guy. To see Coach Parcells, your father-in-law, Dallas's father, get inducted into the Patriots Hall of Fame. That must have been cool for you guys as a family. That was pretty cool.
Dallas was my wife. Dallas was happy. All of them were happy. And I talked to Bill that day. I gave him a call. I wanted to let a couple hours, and he's excited.
Yeah,
right. Because
it's a big deal.
Sometimes it's a huge deal.
Yeah,
and here's the thing: when he got there, he transformed that franchise.
No question. No doubt.
And he brought a level of accountability again that was not only needed, but it really kind of fits into, I think, the New England attitude and personality.
Yeah, no doubt.
Even though he's a New Jersey guy, but the way it's something that New Englanders respect.
Yep, no doubt. It was awesome. Awesome to see that.
And I'll tell you what, that helped us, Billy. Because he was only there for a few years. They lost that Super Bowl to the Packers. But when we got there were still some of those players in place that he had brought in, whether it was Willie and Chris Slade and Lawyer. And, there's a bunch of guys there that he had brought in that were not good players. They were really, really good players.
Yeah. That's no doubt.
His drafts were terrific.
Yeah.
Before we let you go, Scott, we must ask you your favorite Bill O'Brien story.
No. I'm going to tell this story real quick. This will be a 5-second story, 30-second story.
So and I'm not telling the story because Billy's family. We got family.
Yeah, we got family. Yeah, thanks. So when my first year there, I was in charge of handing out practice schedules. And what Scott just said about it takes a certain type of person to work at the Patriots is exactly right, because it was very complicated and it was very you had to think quickly in many situations, very quickly, no matter what your role was. You had to. There were things you could take your time doing, but then there were other things that had to be done right then. So, anyways, I was in charge. So the practice schedule would not really get done until, right before practice. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, because there'd be adjustments and things like that. So his office was upstairs. And so the stairway was kind of right next to Josh's office. So I'm running around. I had to give it to the equipment guys. I had to give it to the defensive coaches, the offensive coaches. Had to make sure Coach Belichick had his head coach schedule. Boom, I'm sprinting. The practice is in 10 minutes.
You're getting a workout.
Well, I forget to go upstairs and give him his practice schedule. I forget to give him his. He's the general manager, right?
Oh, boy.
This guy's got my career in the palm of his hands, right?
No, stop that.
So we go out to practice, and I'm sitting there, and at that time I was helping Dante do something, whatever. I'm helping Dante set up a bag or something for Dante. And here comes Scott, and he comes across the field, and he's beeline right to me, and he's like, "Hey man, just because I'm a coach doesn't mean I don't get a fucking practice schedule." If I could have dug a hole and crawled in it, I would have. I told McDaniels right after practice, I think I'm getting fired. I didn't give Pioli his practice schedule.
Oh man, that was the last time that ever happened.
Yeah,
I probably had it. Maybe I had. maybe I was sleep deprived.
No, I deserved
didn't have
it.
my coffee. But here's the simple
that's
thing.
what you're talking about, though.
But
You gotta
it's
be
the
ready.
details.
The
It's
details, no question.
And that was one of this is, you mentioned Parcells. Parcells used to have this saying, and Billy, I know you're going to know this because I shared it with every single young guy that worked with us. And Parcells ripped me one time when we were at the Jets. Well, he ripped me a couple of times, but this one particular time because I had the rosters, the pro board in my office, and it was vertically by team, horizontally by position. It was every single guy in the league. And then when you had the big training camp rosters, and I swear I was so meticulous on this thing. And he comes in one day, I'll never forget, and he looks at the board, and he goes over the board, and you can't see me, but he just flicks the magnet off the board and falls on the ground. He goes, "Hey, one wrong, all wrong." And he just walked out. And I was like, it was one of the many times I wanted to chase him and maybe get in a fight with him, but I knew better. And I'll never forget, but that saying "one wrong, all wrong," and Billy, like me breaking your stones on that.
Yeah.
That wasn't me just trying to make you have a bad day.
No.
It was part of how I was raised in
Yeah.
this system, and I know part of what made all of us. Some people, it wasn't their cup of tea, but the reality is we're striving for perfection.
No
we know
question.
it's likely. So if one part is wrong, then the integrity of the entire thing is wrong. And just detail.
No doubt.
Now, once you get trained that way and you learn that, now I'll ask you this, Billy, isn't that both a blessing and a curse?
Yes.
Right, because you can't undo certain things, and
Yeah.
then you become a little OCD yourself.
Yeah, one of the curses too, a little bit, is you're working at a place where the best of the best are, right? And then you go to other places, and you're trying to, in your own way, teach and try to educate people on how you believe it should be done, and that can be very difficult. I know you know what I'm talking about, and so that's one of the things that you try to do when you go to other places and talk about what made it one of the many things that made it a great place.
Yeah, not everyone wants to be great.
That's right.
Not everyone wants to do what it takes to be
That's
great.
right.
That's a good title for a book. Now, Belichick's coming out with a book next month. I'm sure you're mentioned prominently, which you should be. Have you ever thought about writing a book?
I would never write a book. Well, it depends on what kind of book.
You'd write
You should.
A great
You definitely
book,
should.
man.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing is, when you see some of these books, even though it's mostly, even you do a leadership book, you might have to tell a story that might unintentionally throw some shade on someone that doesn't deserve it, or
That's
something
true.
happened 20
True.
years ago that dumps on someone that doesn't deserve it or need it.
True.
I like things like this, being able to explain stories,
Yeah.
situations, and experiences, because we could talk stories, all day, and it's not. Sometimes books can, I don't know. I just, and if you saw my grammar,
Well, we would have somebody edit it.
We'd have a ghostwriter.
I'd need a ghostwriter. Trust me. Trust me.
Scott, this has been a pleasure.
Awesome.
We can't thank you enough.
Thank you.
We got to bring you back for part 2.
Yep.
Pioli part 2 before the NFL season. Would that work for you?
Absolutely. Maybe you guys will have video in place by then, and I could show off. Maybe I'll have a new BC football, something to wear.
Yeah, this is it's a good production. It's a low level production right now. Like these mic stands and these mics, and this is a World War II thing that we plug in from 1940. The Wind Talkers used it back in the.
Hey,
We're elevating in the next couple months, Scott.
We might be in a studio someday.
Yes, that's on the docket.
Somebody like you, the status of you, we're not bringing you back until we are in a studio.
No, he's definitely going to be in studio with us.
No doubt.
Definitely. But Scott, thank you.
That was awesome.
Best of luck to Mia, and congratulations to the family on her graduating.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And thanks for having me on.
That was awesome.
Thank you. Scott Pioli on the Bill O'Brien Podcast.
Audio for all episodes of the Bill O'Brien Podcast are now published exclusively to the Podcast for Boston, the official podcast of Boston College Athletics. Be sure to like and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. The complete archives of the Bill O'Brien Podcast are also available at bceagles.com/podcasts.
All right, if you're a football fan, you are loving every second of Scott Pioli. That was outstanding content, as we say in the biz.
Yeah, I learned a lot from him. He was, like I said, he was very involved on the coaching side and the evaluation side, and he would, I was only with him for 2 years, right? Because he went to Kansas City after the 2008 season, after Castle went 11-5 after Tom got hurt, and so, but I learned a lot from him in those 2 years, no doubt about it.
And the knowledge, the wealth
smart.
of knowledge. I could listen to him. That's why we talked about writing a book. I mean, I'd read that book in a heart. I'm looking forward to the Belichick book.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
You better be in that, by the way.
I'm sure he list of all-time assistant coaches that coach for him. It's about the only part I'll be in the book.
He's got to have something in there about Bill
Talk
O'Brien.
about that unbelievable
I
offense with Moss, no?
It was good. 2010 and 11, man. You go look up those stats.
No, that's what
10
I'm
and
saying.
11, those are pretty good offenses.
You guys are we don't dispute that.
No, we don't.
What did you want to ask?
I wanted to ask
before we get
about
out
Lee
of here?
Corso. Lee Corso memory, retiring from college game
Good
day.
one, yes.
Lee Corso is, as you guys know, an absolute legend. When I got the Penn State job, I got the Penn State job on it was a Friday. There was something going on. I think a national champ. I forget exactly what, but they were on like during that same time, and so I had to call him and talk to him about Penn State, and he was a huge Joe Paterno. He loved Joe Paterno. Kind of told me a lot of stories about Joe Paterno, and then he was always good to me, and so I got nothing but great memories of Lee Corso.
What a character, genuine, authentic guy, compassionate about the game. Didn't know anything about broadcasting when he started, but he grew into the job.
Yeah.
And the relationship he had with Herb Street at the end was great.
Yeah, I think like how I read an article where how ESPN has treated Dick Vitale and Lee Corso is incredible because, those guys are in their mid-80s, 90s, and, they're kind of known more for their TV, history than they are their coaching history. And, it says a lot about what they brought to the games, basketball and football, two legendary guys.
We need him to put on the Baldwin the Eagle head one last time.
Well, it's the whole thing, right? We talk about TV shows that your top, whatever, 5 or 10, but like in the fall, it's like my favorite show.
Oh, yeah.
Like I get mad when we have noon games on the road. Like I can't watch it until noontime.
Exactly.
It's like
I can remember like when we have a bye week or in the pros when I was coaching for Houston and Saturday morning, maybe we weren't, meeting until the afternoon or whatever, and Michael and I would be watching Game Day that's one of the greatest shows of all time.
all time.
Yeah, no, they do a great job of that. All right, and we would be remiss to not memorialize the memory of Don Hasselbeck, who passed away. And after a heart attack, BC lineage with Tim and Matt and Mallory and Annabelle, both outstanding lacrosse players. And Don Hasselbeck, not only people think of him as a Patriot, but a great football mind as well.
Yeah, very sad day for all of us here at BC. I sent Matt and Tim a text, and I went through a little bit. I got to know Don. He would be down at Gillette quite a bit on game day when I was there, and awesome guy. And I also, when I was growing up, as you guys remember, it was him and Russ Francis. I mean, those guys, that's when 12 personnel really started to come into play in the NFL. We had Russ Francis. They drafted Don Hasselbeck and out of Colorado, and so I had his football card, and the Hasselbeck family is a legendary Boston College family, and our hearts go out to them. We lost him way too soon, and just awesome dad, awesome husband, awesome football player, and gave back to the game in a great way when he retired. So everybody's going to miss Don Hasselbeck.
No question about that. And finally, you got some movement on the portal front. Picked up a linebacker from Wisconsin, Platteville, a Division III school.
Yeah, Will Straka. We feel really good about him. Be a core special teams player, tough guy. Probably had about 15 tackles a game. He dominated at that level. We're thrilled to have him. Great dude. We've got a couple other guys that are visiting right now. D lineman, linebacker. Won't get into all the names and things, but we won't. Again, we're a high school recruiting. That's what we are. We're going to develop players. We just talked about that with Scott. But in the end, if we have some needs, then we'll go out and find some guys that fit Boston College, and we feel like we're on the right track with a couple of these guys.
And you'll be back with us next week, but then you go on the road in May. You ready to road grade?
Yep, going on the road only for a couple of weeks though. We might be able to Zoom it, I guess.
I don't know. Yeah, with this wind talker machine, we can zoom you in.
Well, the tomato cans, they
I don't know if that's capable.
Reach all the way to Dallas,
We'll have to get that extended wire for you to carry it with you. We can do that on the road if that works for you.
Every week we're working on a volume.
Fit us into your schedule.
Volume. Well, he's a busy guy.
Busy man.
Just don't forget us. Bill O'Brien.
What was that?
I don't know. I always say that. Don't forget the little people. Bill O'Brien, Steve Ciaccio, Scott Pioli. Episode 39, Mike Gator Greenwell. Don't forget as well, Danny Woodhead.
Oh, Woody. I coached Woody. He was awesome. What a great guy. And an unbelievable golfer.
Really?
Yeah.
Scratch?
Small though, too, right? Like 5.
I think he almost qualified for a tournament a couple of years ago.
Like 5'8" or something?
Yeah, but thick legs.
That's
can I tell a quick
small
story?
school guy. Danny
Playing the
Woodhead.
Indianapolis Colts. He just gotten to New England, and Bill said, "I want this guy in the game," so we got him in there. A couple third down. We run a draw inside trap from about the 40-yard line. He runs a 40-yard touchdown, goes out, kickoff, boom, goes down and tackles the guy inside the 15-yard line on the kickoff the very next play.
That's the guy you're looking for, though,
Oh,
right?
my God, this guy, he was the best.
He had that
And a
football innate sense.
great dude, great guy, great teammate. One of those guys that, I don't think he won a Super Bowl in New England like some of us didn't, but just a legendary Patriot, no doubt about it.
Joe Theismann.
You got the commercial reads?
And I'll put him in myself.
Josh, let's see, he does this on purpose.
No, I don't. I
He
couldn't
likes to
find
hear
it.
his own voice.
I couldn't find it. I got up and couldn't find it. So
He's become a big part of this.
well, a coach was on.
a huge
Scott
part.
was on rather than Zoom, so I didn't want to
Josh is
interrupt
the MVP.
me and my
What's
wind
the
talker. How's your wind
The wind
talker?
talker. I don't know what a wind
Tremendous.
talker
I don't
is,
either.
but-
It's back in the war days, right?
It's like having a walkie-talkie.
Sid Luckman had better equipment than this.
Yeah, it does. But it looks like Sid Luckman's, battery pack that he used on the sideline
one
in
of the top
1950.
podcasting pieces of
He was
equipment
coaching the San Diego Chargers.
as of 3 weeks ago. Now it may have changed.
Well, Bill's willing to put up his money for it, so hey.
Hold on, we got to see how much one of those things costs. What does the upgrade cost? We might need
You
a
know how
bonus.
much it was?
Oh,
bonus.
boy. All right, that's
We all
going to
need
wrap it
bonuses.
up, boys. We got to get out of here. Thanks for listening, everybody. We look forward to hearing you again on episode 40.